You're welcome back. This Newsfile is your most authoritative news analysis platform. My guest, Abdul Malik Kubaku, editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Dennis Ejay Jumo, he's a lawyer. Roxton Nelson Dafiamapo is lawyer, MP Saudai, and member, Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament. Martin Pebu is a right activist. He's also a private legal practitioner. Okay, so later we will be joined by Professor Audrey Gajepo, Dean, School of Information and Communication Studies. On the phone, we will be joined by a very distinguished citizen, senior citizen, Samuel Intim Dakwa, former clerk of Parliament. And I can see some of the guys in the studio already holding books written by him. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Great. Okay, so we're starting on a very controversial note. In fact, all the subject matters are controversial, but this has been, you know, it's been on the front burner for a long time, except that it does appear people have been afraid, particularly the politicians, to touch the subject. It's a subject where the church room or the church house has become a clear business enterprise. It's like a market of sorts, what Jesus preached against, and picked the whip and began to whip people around the place. That's exactly what the church has become. Every stuff is being sold in churches today. It's not only anointing oil. It's not only some soap, but a lot. Water to drink, pure water is being sold in the churches. Pastors are making their congregants eat grass. I mean green grass. Some of them are making them attempt to hold on to snakes, because the Bible says they shall lay hold of snakes and nothing shall happen to them. But the filth of richness that is in the church now, is it a matter for concern? The church that has become a prison for sick people, disabled people, chained around the church places. Is that allowed? And how will that stop? Is it by regulation and by law? Parliament has begun the process. The Speaker has mandated 2 committees of the House of Parliament, Youth and Culture and so on, and also the Parliamentary Legal Affairs. Where will they take us? The churches have started speaking, and they are kicking against it outright. So let me begin with Roxton Nelson Dafiamapo, who is a member of the Legal Affairs Committee, who will be part of this whole process. And I understand that the leadership of the churches have begun meetings with you, trying to convince Parliament that this is not necessary. How is the committees thinking at this time?
Well, Sam, thank you very much. Let me use the opportunity to customarily say good morning to my constituents.
Predictable.
Yes, Peki Kwali Kwevetongo, especially the 12th,
Yeah.
the paramount chief of Peki traditional area.
Because of them, you may never be arrested.
Yeah, it's a privilege to serve them. Now, indeed, I must agree that the leadership of, I think, 3 groupings of the churches, the Christian grouping, met with the Speaker and some selected leadership of Parliament yesterday. And I was privileged to represent the minority leader in that meeting. Indeed, we had to assure them that it is not the Parliament, qua Parliament, that has so much initiated any process to legislate, as it were, or regulate, as it were, their how they practice their faith at all. Neither is it the position of the government to do that. It was as a result of, you know, as MPs, we have the right to comment on any matter of national concern and even of international concern. So one of our colleagues, Eko Hayford, I think the MP for Infants Mine, he read a statement on the floor, and rather unpredictably, the statement engendered a lot of comments from other members. And so when it happens like that, the speaker will naturally want further action to be taken on the matter. So given the number of persons who were interested in commenting on the statement, the speaker had to refer it to my committee as well as the other committee for us to look at the possibility of coming out with some recommendations. And so to that extent, the leadership of the Christian Council, the Ghana Pentecostal Council, as well as one other group I've forgotten, they came. So apart from the assurance, they are for regulation, honestly. And so I was surprised to read that others are saying no, they think that what is going on is unacceptable, and there's a need for some cleansing to be done. And Speaker had to tell them that, no, I think it was the majority leader who said, well, they have to judge themselves so that they are not judged. And they agreed that they are willing to judge themselves so they are not judged. So we've asked them to send some memoranda in respect of what they think can be done. We are looking at situations where one man, husband and wife, husband and wife, or somebody and the brother will set up a company by guarantee and set up a church and run the church like a sole proprietorship and do all manner of things in the name of faith. That is what we want to avoid. And you see, to the extent that they are so powerful now, they can own television stations and propagate all manner of things in the name of spiritism, faith, prophecies. And not only in the Christian faith, but practices in Mohammedanism, where Malams are on TV now, commercializing all manner of things, to the extent that even wealth can be sold if you are willing to follow the rituals or the things that they prescribe. And they are actually running advertorials, outdoor advertorials, asking people to patronize their spiritual services for purposes of it. It has a certain effect on the generality of the people. People think that now you don't have to work to become wealthy, or you don't have to work to be successful. You can actually do these things, and with the stroke of some magical wand, wealth will come to you. It's very dangerous for our youth. And also to the extent that the traditional faith healers are also involved. So we are not looking at churches, qua churches. We are looking at all manner of faith practitioners. What should we do? How do we regulate the establishment of those? But not the practice of faith, because you appreciate the fact that even in law, there's no place for spiritism in the law. You can't prove matters, spiritual matters in the law.
Deputy.
Yes. So we can't do that. But we are saying, how must we look at regulating operation of churches? If you want to establish a church. For instance, I'll be for a situation where if you are a church and you don't operate a clinic or a school, you shouldn't operate. There should be a certain social intervention to your operation. So I'm an evangelical Presbyterian, so I'm a Presbyterian. I love my AP church because of what they do for this country. I've had the benefit of what the Roman Catholic Church does for Ghana. I've benefited from, for instance, I am impressed with what the Pentecostal Church is doing, what the
International Central Gospel.
Yes, what they have moved from to become now. They moved from a small corner shop church from Old Fadama. Now they become a very international church with schools and all. And that is the way we want the churches to go. But not remain like a sole proprietorship. The person, the general overseer, does whatever he likes with the church and things that he cannot be controlled. We should be able to have some regulation down there. Okay. So it is within this remit.
Yes. Take a breather. Now, Martin, I've been asking myself, What exactly are we seeking to regulate? See, there are very responsible churches who have actually produced responsible citizens. To become a priest in the Catholic Church, you go through between 7-8 years, and some of them do even more of that.
Yeah, the Jesuits do about 10.
Yeah. About 10 years.
Yeah.
Some of them, by the time they are done, look, they have PhDs in theology, whatever. They go through training as though you were training to become a doctor, or these days, even becoming a lawyer, the years are not up to 7 years. So if there is one or two irresponsible preachers and they are doing all the wrong things, must that be a basis to want to provide for a law to regulate, so to speak, the activities of churches?
Wow. Okay, Sam, I'm not sure they are just one or two. In actual fact, our country is awash with all manner of pastors that shouldn't be doing what they are doing. They are not one or two. You know, in this day and age of social media, you find so many WhatsApps of pastors. You see the pastor is in church, and then you find a middle-aged woman who takes the pastor, puts him at her back. You find a pastor who asks people, congregants, to kneel, and then he steps on them. All manner of things, pouring water. Look, there are many. There are not just one or two. There are many. So, look, we are even far behind regulation. We need to. You see, and when we say regulation, we are not saying that everything should be handed over to government. No, 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 that's not it. You could have the ecclesiastical courts, you see. Even the common law courts, when they started, was not priests who administered it.
Indeed,
when they were doing the courts of equity.
Indeed, yes.
Yes, it was the Lord Chancellor and those, they were priests.
Okay, so what Martin is referring to now is the beginning of the court system in England. That's why I'm saying common law, chancery, those things. Don't get confused.
Laws of equity. So the priest administered the laws of equity in a different court, and then we had the common law court. So what I'm saying is that if we say we want to regulate, it should not just be saying as, oh, people want to teach doctrine. No. Oh, religion has played such a great part in our lives. I mean, well before the current generation were born. So as I'm saying, even from the time of the courts of equity. Okay, yes, but now we've reached that stage where we should begin to rein in those who are not doing it right, as I've already referred to some of those excesses. So we can have a law which would then have some, like in the nature of, I mentioned earlier, like the National Media Commission. It's not as if you have the National Media Commission, yet when a journalist does something that we think, well, he's breached ethics or anything defamatory, a citizen has a right to go to court or go to the National Media Commission. So for those who are saying that, oh, we have the laws, we don't need any further regulation, that's not true. If we have a regulator in the nature of like the National Media Commission, it will be cheaper there, presumably, because when you want to go into court, let's take a typical example. You know, the Bannermans sued ICGC and another church in Hachu. If you read the judgment by Justice Ayene, Efua Ayene, okay, you see that it took years, and it's expensive to retain a lawyer to conduct a case for you in court. But I'm sure if, let's say, you're going to a place like National Media Commission, it will cost you next to nothing. So you see that saying that we should set up a regulator manned by the churches themselves is good, so that will be cheaper. So that if a church in my neighborhood is making so much noise, I don't have to go chasing AMA. And you know, AMA doesn't have enough of those machines, the ones that they use to measure the decibels. Yeah. You can chase them for months, and you don't get them to come and measure the decibels.
Indeed, they have to go to EPA.
Yes. Very good, yes, because EPA originally has the mandate and all that. So you see that it's expensive trying to say that, oh, citizens should go to court. There are already enough laws. No, if we have a regulator that would have resources, it is going to be cheaper for us to report excesses.
The question people have asked is this not the state trying to legislate its failure? Because as you began to, explain to all of us, there are pastors who are stepping on their congregants, assault, battery, There are pastors who are stepping on pregnant women in the name of being instructed by the Holy Spirit.
Healing.
Okay? Yes. They are causing such harm to them. The pastors who are pulling canes in their churches and whipping people.
Yes.
Pastors who are taking money that is taxable and not paying tax.
Yes.
So their criminal acts are being committed in the church. The state that is supposed to take the responsibility of prosecuting them is not doing that. They are evading tax. The state that's supposed to go after them and take the tax is not doing that. And you just gave the last example. So if the state is failing to do that job, why should it go through a legislation? Why don't you just go ahead and enforce the laws that already exist?
Yeah.
EPA has decibel, a certain permitted decibels that you cannot make noise beyond.
Yeah.
If they are making that noise, EPA must take charge and deal with them. So what are we saying?
So as I stated earlier, it's a very complex issue. One, the influence of these pastors, okay? And then two, financial resources. So you see that, so let's take a typical example, the Justice Ayene case that I gave. It took years. It's expensive to say that we should enforce, okay? So let's say criminal prosecution. I think Obi Nim was charged for that caning of the teenagers, right? It took some years before finally judgment was given. He was fined. But if we had a body that is manned by senior pastors, so like as you mentioned earlier, you have the bishops and all that.
Representation.
Very good. Yes, and of course, it will have representation from civil society and citizens. I think that because of their inclination, because of their special expertise and all that, they could be faster. Okay, and also some of the remedies. So let's take specifically, as you said, the ones that you've seen pastors taking canes, you've seen pastors stepping on pregnant women there. Remember, in our criminal jurisprudence, if nobody goes to report, the state cannot commence any hearing or charge them. So I'm thinking that when we set up the regulator, then they will have a monitoring unit that should go round to see if the right thing has been done. So they are regulating themselves. You see,
if a pastor commits murder, we say because you did this in the church, we'll take you to a regulator and not prosecute you in court for murder.
Very good. So in that case, so just for the avoidance of doubt, we will do it in such a way that for the serious offenses, yes, we will go to the normal state court. You say yes. So we will regulate all this so that we are looking at especially the excesses which the congregants are not willing to report. And also, you know, the congregants themselves, they are vulnerable. You know, poverty creates a lot of vulnerabilities. People believe in witches and all that, you see, as a result of poverty. Yeah, I don't subscribe to those. You see, yes, I think there's a certain correlation between poverty and some of those things that are going on.
The pastor is selling soap, is selling mineral water,
exactly,
and selling one at about, you know, 1,000 Ghana cedis
exactly
or more.
Yes.
And he's not paying tax on this.
Yes.
He's not complying with the regulations that require him to deal with this as a business. We take him to regulator instead of letting the taxman chase him.
Good. No, Sam. So your intervention is very good. So for the avoidance of that, as I stated earlier, we will couch the law in such a way that for these serious criminal offenses, the state will deal with them. But those that appear to be knockers, those that as you said, the stepping of pregnant women, killing them and the rest, that the congregants are not willing to report, then the regulator takes care of. Because you know elsewhere, especially look at the Americans, you see how celebrities, even like Wesley Snipes and all that, the big celebrities, see how they've been to court. They don't play with their tax issues. No,
right.
Even if it's small, they'll make sure that they even like to punish those, prosecute the celebrities because it serves as a warning. There was a case which we did in Ghana. The man came to Ghana, a client, okay, and because of alleged taxes that he owes, they brought a private aircraft and bundled them out. Even though the court had, Justice Anthony Ibu had given us an order of habeas corpus had been granted, so they were to bring him to court. Oh, you know how these things happen. Long and short, a private jet bundled the American citizen back home. So I even asked myself, I said, what's the cost of the aircraft coming in and all that? You say, Yes, so, but it appears our level of development, you know, also has to do with our inability to collect the taxes and all that. But I believe that gradually, as we're improving, we would increase those. But please, as for the regulation, it's very necessary. Very necessary. Let them get proper education so that they will stop those excesses.
Dennis, do you understand that if we had, first, whether you support this or not, and if you did, do you understand that if we have such a regulation or a regulator, it would include for the regulator to intervene when you are said to be propagating what is not scriptural? Because a lot of that is what is taking our attention. They are doing things that you clearly, you don't need to have read the Bible, you know, up to even finish the New Testament, reading it, to know that what they are doing is not scriptural. So will that not be seeking to unconstitutionally interfere with the independence granted them by the Constitution?
I'm saying,
for the manifestation of their faith.
I think that any regulation that we seek to pass, we might slip as a country. Parliament will slip in this course of, because you see, most of us are prejudiced based on our upbringing. I'm a Catholic, I'm used to rosary, I'm used to the Catholic, even among the Christians, let us not make a mistake and think that we have one standard interpretation of the Bible. There's a King James Version Bible, there's a Catholic Bible, there are certain things Jehovah's Witnesses will differ from the Catholic will differ from the Pentecostal. And it's for that matter that the framers of the Constitution, in their wisdom, started by saying that in the name of the Almighty God. So the question that we start asking after, what is this constitutional God? Is it the Catholic God or the Presbyterian God or the EP God? And goes ahead to talk about the right to practice and your religion of your choice and manifest it by where you go to church. In Catholic Church, we bow to the Holy Eucharist, we say rosary prayers, among other things. And so the question I ask myself when these all discussions, what are you going to regulate? Are you regulating the church? Or are you regulating the pastors? Or are you regulating the practice or the manifestation of the faith? And these are things that, if you check other jurisdictions where legislations were sought to do, and I will say that my learned friend, great respect to him, the examples that he's given gives you where he's coming from, that if you're a Catholic, brought up in a Catholic school, there are instances where you think that somebody clapping his hands, okay, and shouting on top of his voice might not be orderly, because in the Catholic Church, God is orderly among other things. And that's why some of us think that we should not regulate. I am of the opinion that the churches should not be regulated because there's a confusion as in what exactly are you regulating. And remember that all the excesses of the church has been dealt with extensively by the law. So where a church is located, the town and country planning must decide where are you going to locate a church. But we have in this country where town and country planning is not performing its work. It's the same for siting of filling stations, among other things.
So when you say town and country planning, for example, there is a zoning policy for this Kokomlemle area where we are. 55 Hanover. The zoning policy does not allow business. Does not allow churches to be set up. But before you say Jack, you are surrounded by churches.
So the fact, if the zoning policy was upheld by the town and country planning, there will not be a church in an estate in the first place. Secondly, if the building permit, because before you build,
need a church in an estate.
I'm just saying, it's about the zoning policy. Let's move ahead. By any building you seek to construct, you need a building permit.
Correct.
The building permit will consider the exit, where you are supposed to pass, the kind of infrastructure, how many stories, before they'll grant you a building permit. Let's ask, how many churches in this country have building permits? And these places where you enter a church, where there's only one door entering the church, in case there's an emergency, what happens? Do they have fire extinguishers? Which the law prescribed they should have. So as we speak, all these things are not being done. Okay, let's come to the practice of the faith. If you go to section 289 of the Criminal and Other Offences Act, there's plethora of laws against nuisance, laws which relate to, in terms of making nuisance, in terms of blocking public way, in terms of, you know, assault and battery. So there are so much laws over there.
Charlatanic advertisements.
It's there. So you don't need a regulator. And I'll give you the issue of the regulation. You are adding Ghana. If you want to see the beauty of Ghana, look at our laws. Don't look at our people who are in it. The laws. Shraj. National Media Commission, pastors parading children. I'm not even talking about the adults who can reason for themselves and decide that by reason of where I've got, I'm an adult, I can decide by my fate, I believe that if I drink quote and unquote Dettol, I will survive. I'm talking about children who the law says that the best interest of the child has to be protected. And TV stations are permitted to show pastors telling these children that they are witches and wizards when the Children's Act says that you cannot subject any child to degrading and inhuman conditions, and it's actually an offense. The policeman who is at the police station is watching the TV. The pastor is going ahead, and these kids are saying that, oh, I'm a witch. I actually was the one who doesn't allow my mother to give birth. I did this. I went to the spiritual realm. The pastor says all manner of things. The policeman looks at it and says that these kids are witches of today. While the policeman knows, or ought to have known, that that particular conduct of the pastor on TV is a criminal offense for which the pastor ought to have been arrested. And
pause there. Martin just told you that you need someone who feels offended to make a complaint. Then you can take it on from there. You are saying they could act without a complaint.
Yes, you can. You can. And I respectfully disagree with my learned friend. If the police, somebody is committing an offense, even as private citizens, a duty
is...
Act
30, you can do that in the commission of... or about to commit a crime.
And apart from that, SRAJ is mandated by law, okay, to present a report. And as part of SRAJ investigation, they can investigate a conduct of human rights abuses. Okay, so SRAJ is there. And I believe that officers of SRAJ watch TV, or they might have heard that these incidents have happened. I have not seen any SRAJ report on that. I come to the Ministry of Women and Children Affairs, or Gender. Have you ever heard the Ministry of Gender issue a paper or deciding that in terms of the conduct of churches on children, I have taken a position, I'm going to the Attorney General's Department, I'm going to work with the IGP, who is supposed to ensure that the laws are actually, we have not seen that. Now, if you're going to appoint a regulator, what powers are you going to give the regulator?
So these sector ministries, like you suggest, can actually issue papers and give certain guidelines and require these churches or for the specific areas that they have responsibility for and require compliance.
Yes,
they can do that.
They can do that. And you see, the spectrum of which any pastor airs his TV station is governed by the NCA,
right?
Which has a sector minister, Minister for Communication. Okay, so the ministry can take a decision that for instance, if you are on multi-TV digital platform, multi-TV can say as a policy, if you show any children, any aspect involving children, we are going to take you off. Even the market regulating itself. Now, one thing that I've also realized in this discourse is that there is a gradual, we are taking a narrow focus on the practice of the Christian faith, if you listen to most of the discourse, as compared to the generality of it. Now, case law has established in the US that when you pass a legislation which seeks to be targeted and not of general nature, especially involving religion, the courts are going to shut it down. So I think that the Constitution also further says that if you are practicing any of your right, be it religion, it should not interfere with other person's right. Martin has mentioned the fact that it's expensive to go to court. Okay, you go to court, the court has the biting power to subpoena. The regulator will have the fighting power to subpoena because...
So you give the regulator the power.
Exactly.
Good. So at the end of the day, in terms of enforcement of that position, Martin will agree that when it comes to those, I'm using an example, those financial institutions that fall under Security and Exchange Commission, practitioners will concede that the Security and Exchange Commission, which has been set up to regulate, because it doesn't have biting powers, you technically waste time when you go to that commission before you go to court for enforce. Okay,
so we can learn from our experience.
So I'm just saying that it's a slip. You can easily slip. Who are you regulating? Because the conduct that Martin is complaining about.
Are you saying if the regulation does not touch on doctrinal differences, it's okay? Because that is where you think there would be a problem.
I think that there is enough regulation. The fact that it has not been put together in one compendium of laws to say that this is the religious act does not mean that there is no regulation.
Okay.
There is already a regulation which regulates in terms of how building permits are supposed to be issued, even like where you should conduct your marriages.
So what is wrong if you have a body like Roxanne has suggested?
Yes.
a body of like-minded,
Ecumenical body,
respected senior clergymen, you know, come together, and they will now decide, even if we are not sort of passing a legislation, they will now decide and say, let's collect the various laws and bring them together and sensitize the people that are under us to get to know that these are the things you ought to obey, and so on and so forth.
One, we have already had a practice in terms of history to learn from. The Constitution mandates the National House of Chiefs to compile the customary laws of this country. Has it been done? No, it has not been done, so far as I recollect. The issue of putting this ecclesiastical court, who is going to form the composition of it, especially when we have a constitution with guarantees who will fall under your jurisdiction. Because remember that when it comes to the Catholic Church, they have their own discipline issues to the sense that if something happens, they can take you there. Now you are going to set up an interdenominational, put it that way, regulatory body. Who is going to some Reverend Fathers do not believe in this aspect of sorcery, aspect of witchcraft or deciding now we're supposed to practice your faith. So I'm saying that because of the Constitution guaranteeing that freedom of religion for each and every individual, so long as
the example you are just giving, sorcery and stuff, that's prohibited by scripture. So why does it come in?
Which scripture are you talking about?
Something? Scripture
which scripture? I'm just saying to you that at the end of the day,
mediums, the Bible refers to them.
At the end of the day, I'm just saying that at the end of the day, we should concede that we are prejudiced.
Okay.
I am prejudiced because when somebody does something.
Okay, so just hold on. We know your view now. Okay. Let's hear from Kwekutu before we continue on this and sort of wrap up on those of you who agree the nature and fashion in which it should come up. Those of you who do not agree, what you propose should be the most effective way to curb the excesses that are becoming rather, the default in the situation. Now, Kweku, so this will not be new. In other countries, we know that they have attempted it and they've been successful. We know about what happened in Rwanda. The parliament passed a law, legislating to regulate faith-based organizations. Among others, you need a degree, as in theology, basics degree in theology to be able to be a pastor and to run a church. There's a way monies that comes to the church must go through a certain process so that we don't have pastors who, like he said, husband and wife sole proprietorship. They take all the money, unfortunately, from poor, congregants, and they live in heaven, literally. So why not? We can also try it. South Africa, they tried to do it, but there was some opposition, including from the Catholic Church, and it didn't work.
Rwanda has done.
Yes. So what's the big deal?
You know what? We have a history. We've done this before. Fortunately, I couldn't locate the exact legislative piece, but there was something about a PNDC law 221, which
91 or so
regulate the churches. It was fiercely resisted. I was one of those who resisted it.
So who is it?
I was not alone. Indeed, the democratic forces or the pro-democracy forces joined that crusade. In the transition to constitutional rule, the laws that we consider repressive and anathema to human rights constitutionalism, consistently we cited PNDC law 221. I hope I'm right with the...
Yes. You're right with law 221. Yeah.
And insisted that it should be repealed as part and parcel of the transition towards constitutional rule. Indeed, the Catholic Bishops' Conference, I have their publications here. Some of the points that have been raised here were articulated by them as far back as in a communique which was at a conference in Ho, July 3rd to July 7th, 1989. And they make very interesting points. Almost all the points that have been expressed here are captured here, so I wouldn't want to go back to them. But you know, there are a lot of things happening. Some of this phenomena we are talking about, if you read this Catholic bishops thing, were there. Perhaps it's only increased in the times of scale and coverage, because after we are increasing in population and towns and city size and things. I would want to see the draft, or if like, whatever decision the committee comes out with, if it's put in the form of a draft bill or whatever, because if Parliament is going to pass some regulations or law, obviously we will have a draft bill. They will be requesting for a memorandum from the society, public sector and all the rest. Then perhaps we can have a more informed discussions. But instinctively, I think we will have a difficulty with legislating. And this is because of our history and my own history. I have no problem helping to wage a campaign against these matters, to conscientize the society, the public, to see through these things, because some of them are fraudulent. Some of them really kill the society and our spirit. And it's our right within the Constitution to launch a campaign against such people. I don't have any problem with that. Indeed, I will join it. And we're not talking of just Christians, but even Islam. There are sects across the religious divide, except that perhaps the noise is more on the level of the Christians. But there's no doubt that we should be looking across the political, like the religious divide. And that is why I'm more interested in seeing what Parliament brings up as a draft, and then we can all interrogate well, because there are some aspects. The question of, you know, where you locate churches, the level of noise, the monies that they collect. Some of our laws can deal with them. Right. And the Catholic bishops call the PNDC's attention to that. Now look here, some of the issues that you are complaining about, the courts and the laws are there to deal with them. The PNDC thought that no, the thing was going beyond a certain limit, and there was the need for a certain quick fix. So that's why they came in with that legislation. So we've got to be very careful how we go about it. You know, it would be difficult to achieve consensus, take it from me, because of the emotive elements. When it comes to religion, sometimes it's difficult. As I draw a line, I know there's an interconnection between the religion and the churches or the mosques. There's a fine line of distinction. So we can, after all, look at their practices. If the practices go against the law, they can be dealt with. Maybe we are seeking to consolidate and have one piece of legislation that can deal with it. Okay. Sometimes that happens. So
Dennis appears to have made that suggestion about consolidating. But Kuku, you seem to say that we know that the premise on which PNDC Law 221 was fought was particularly because, like you just mentioned, it should not be targeted only at churches. And that was one primary issue. The major thing, Section 3 of that law, said every religious body in Ghana shall be registered under this law, and no religious body in existence in Ghana shall, after 3 months from the commencement of this law, operate as such unless it is registered under this law. So, can't we look at what we did and then begin to take the lessons from that and look at what works?
Exactly. I agree, but that's why I want to see the draft bill. We would have captured all these elements there. You know, being a draft is subjected to further interrogation and scrutiny, not just by parliamentarians, but all of us outside. And then perhaps some piece of legislation that would not create problems could be brought up. But if you ask me for my immediate reaction, I tell you it's a tough act. It's really going to be a really tight rope to walk. when you are dealing with emotive matters. And religion, even though, yes, religion, you see, was... anyway, I have to be very careful.
I think we cuts across maybe his previous religion and his current one.
Yes, it's true. I'm virtually a hybrid. No, it's true. But it's a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. And it can create all sorts of controversies. Okay? The PNDC was able to do some of this because it was not a constitutional regime or a dispensation. Don't forget that. In this constitutional dispensation, where there's a lot of...
You are mandated to do things.
It's not easy. Law. It's not easy at all. So they had the fixed and delivered it, whether you liked it or not. In any shape, they just put it down. There was nothing like public, consultations or education. It was a decree that was put in place, not legislation that we know under a constitutional regime. So we've got to be very careful. But whilst we are thinking about this legislative thing and all the rest, some of the things happening, the statutory bodies who are required to work can do something. You understand? They can do something.
Right.
If you see a pastor, anyway.
Okay. Stepping on the pregnant woman.
Yes, I like that. Why should you need a regulation?
Was seeking to indicate something. Under the Religious Bodies Registration Law, 1989, was that extended to include shrines and things where all the other, inhumane, things out of this world are
take
done.
place, yes. Now, thank you very much. You see, I think for what's happening and the discussions presently ongoing, I think for want of a better expression, we are using the word legislation or regulation. But I don't think that is the intent. The intent actually is to be able to fashion a code of conduct sort of thing.
Parliament?
A code of conduct. No, hold on. A code of conduct sort of thing, document.
By Parliament?
It's a recommendation that I think we can make to the religious bodies.
No, just a rude intervention.
Yes.
Then let's take the thing outside Parliament.
Yes, I agree.
Parliament, you are dealing with lawmaking.
Yeah, hold on.
Regulations, whatever you call it, will amount to some lawmaking.
Yes, hold on.
The force of the state behind it.
Yes, hold on.
Force. If you don't obey, you may suffer prison or pay fine.
Otherwise, for
if you are saying it's a code of conduct between themselves, already they don't appear to respect.
Hold on, may I?
They even insult each other.
Yes, I agree. I agree. But when we met the clergy yesterday, they appear to agree to the fact that they need some sort of something to regulate.
Exactly.
You see, it's for want of a better.
No, you took NACA to Parliament. Is it a law?
Now, may I quickly say this? The Constitution speaks of freedom of worship. How do we interpret the word worship? In an elastic manner or in an inelastic manner?
Okay.
Now, I think it has to be a code of conduct for pastors and other faith practitioners. Okay? And we are seeking to see if it's possible to establish an ecumenical body, an association sort of, that you belong to. There will be representation. And this code of conduct will govern what juju practitioners do, what people in Voodooism do, what people in Christendom do, what people that practice the faith of Mohammedanism will do, and all manner of faith. So you know exactly what to do. The regulation will have to be, for instance, do you have to undertake commercial activities in a place of worship? For instance, we can look at that. Do you, for instance, have
a commercial activity is deemed as a manifestation of my faith? How can you regulate
that? Is why the meaning of the word worship have to be looked at. Indeed. You understand? Yeah. So what I think my committee will be doing, we'll look at some of these things. We are going to make a recommendation. We'll prepare a report based on the memos, the views that we receive from all manner of the groupings. then we'll make a recommendation to Parliament that, look here, this is a call rule, but this is a matter of national concern.
Okay.
But given the constitutional issues involved, we think that the executive has the power to direct all the religious bodies to come together, form an ecumenical body of sort with representations, fashion a code of conduct for themselves.
Okay.
And let's see how it plays out.
Okay. Now, Martin, if this is what you think ought to happen, how can it be done so that it is acceptable? And when I was asking about the PNDC law 221, I just went for the definition of a religious body because that's what they sought to regulate.
Okay.
It said that a religious body is section 20. Any association of persons or body or organization which professes adherence to or belief in any system of faith, or worship, or which is established in pursuance of a religious objective. You see, one of the things they didn't also like was the fact that they were going to pay registration fees to the Interior Ministry and all of that, and there was a committee set up. There was a minister at the sort of religious affairs to oversee their activity. They
resisted that.
They felt, I mean, what is it? Would the minister always be somebody of a certain faith?
Okay.
And do we subscribe to that faith? And so on and so forth. Okay. Or you may have an atheist to supervise us.
Yeah, good. So, as you, Honorable is rightly stated it, the first step to take in matters like this is to consult the stakeholders. So I think we're on the right path. And from what he's saying, he says that they seem to agree that something has to be done. Okay. So I believe we will get something out of it because, look, we have suffered for too long. I don't know, those who I say we shouldn't regulate, I don't know if you've had the unpleasant situation of living next to a church. This one-man churches, you find 3 people, then they have loud microphones.
Let me say this. My father in Nachimota had this Cocoa church. You know, he had to go to court to eventually.
But if there's local assemblies working,
so we are wrapping up. We are wrapping up.
So I'm saying
your prescription and your prescription in the absence of the regulation that is being sought.
Okay. First of all, this issue about regulation of churches was also considered by the Constitutional Review Commission when they sat to consider it. And their conclusion was still like, as we have said, don't touch it. It's a very, as you know, Kweku has advised. What we are saying, what I am saying, I'm of the view that there are enough laws that are there. And remember that in this country, we have had an instance where the state has taken a look at trochasy and fiacity, which happens to be somebody's religious practice, or female genital mutilation. So if we think that there are excesses in terms of the Christendom, where certain people are doing, and remember that there are some of these people who we perceive as doing wrong, who might even have police protection.
Yes.
Okay, so if we have taken that opportunity and come to a conclusion that these people are going excesses,
or the policeman is a member.
My position is that there's enough laws to deal with all the excesses, and we just need the people who are mandated by law to act. And if they so act, my learned friend will not have a problem where there will be a church sited close to who is making noise, because the local assembly or the assemblyman will make sure that you enforce the law.
I see. So they will be meeting with you, they will be bringing further, they will be bringing memoranda, and then you consider them and put something together, and then
we'll feed you.
You give it to the speaker.
Yes,
and the speaker
we'll come
and the
to
House
plenary.
will take a decision as to what should happen. Interesting. A couple of comments from some of our audiences, and Charles Rekubrobe says that no one can legislate belief or faith.
We've said that.
After all, chieftaincy, Christianity and Islam started as one-man outfits. The answer is to apply the laws of the land to all citizens. Thank you very much, Charles Rekubrobe, tweeting that. This one says, it's from Nana Ansa Obofor in the UK. He says, in fact, I quite agree with your third speaker. For my 8-year stay in England, I have never seen any church, be it Church of England, Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist, Pentecost, or Charismatic, or these one-man Ghanaian churches, parade any child or sell oil or water to congregants to buy. You can't do that. And even whose British child are you going to call to admit he or she is a witch on live television or radio? Okay, so individual responsibility is also important here. And one more from another sending from England. He says, that's Frank Anderson. He says that the lawyer is asking the wrong question. Churches not having building permits is due to bureaucratic corruption-ridden permit application process. Simple thing as that is riddled with so much delays and unpublished fees. Stop blaming churches and citizens. The state must remove all impediment for citizens to do the right thing. Right, so we take a break. Return, I share a few more of your views on the matter of the churches and questions of regulation. Don't forget that we'll be dealing with the president's comments that's about gender equality or so. That's provoked a lot of commentary. We'll deal with the parliamentarians who don't want to be arrested or taken to court, and Jerry Rawlings asking for the indemnity clauses to be removed. How so? We'll be right back.